In this video, I'm going to talk about how we can use masks in Capture One to add some really nice lighting depth to our photos and separate the subject from the background. Stick with me for this one.
I've selected this photo to demonstrate spatial composition, but before we dive in, let's first take a look at the final result together. So this is what I've done. Of course, there are many steps involved. In the Layers and Masks panel here, you can see that there are several different layers. In this video, we're going to look at how combining some of these layers works. Let's work together on the foreground and environment creation for the background. The first thing we need to do, so naturally this photo has a white balance issue. At first glance, you might not notice it much. We won't get into that here, but by moving our mouse, we can clearly see that the areas which should ideally have equal RGB values actually don't. If you look closely now, in the darker areas, there's a bit more blue than red. The colors in the image are somewhat jumbled, creating an inconsistent balance. This slight imbalance affects the overall visual harmony. Mine shifting towards the blue family, which essentially means there's more blue and if we move across the whole image, as we move our mouse cursor around and in the RGB values displayed at the very top here, it is clear that blue is the most dominant color. You have two different ways to correct the white balance of your image. One is to locate a perfectly white area, which simply does not exist at all in this photo. Alternatively, you can go to the shadowy or darker regions and examine them closely to see which of the channels is more prominent. This way, you can accurately identify exactly what kind of white balance issue your photo has. You can see if the issue lies with Kelvin, meaning within the blue and yellow family, or if it is with tint, meaning between green and magenta. I'm thinking of a dark environment. I'll move forward just a little bit in exactly this area so I can see it much larger. And here it's completely and perfectly clear if you just look right up here. Take a close look at the RGB values. Red is 12, green is 13, and blue is 14. That means they increase sequentially in that specific order. If you want a pure black, since this clothing, or more specifically this specific pair of pants, are black, the RGB values should be much closer to one another to get a purer black. So these values need to be equivalent to each other then. Looking at the display here, the blue value is a bit higher than we want. I'll increase the Kelvin setting a bit more toward the warmer yellow tones and then check the results once more with the sample. Let's see how the overall image looks now. The current RGB values are 12, 13, and 13, which indicates that the image's white balance is likely correct now. Let's go back and let's look at a before and after together. It's completely clear. The photo became a bit warmer and its white balance was corrected. It's not an entirely precise method, but with more hands-on experience, it can help us achieve the correct white balance. All right, that's it for this section. Also, let me tell you that in the layers section, we directly edited the image layer. I highly recommend performing white balance on the image layer initially. This crucial step ensures that any subsequent adjustments you make on additional layers will build upon a stable and accurate color foundation for the next processes, the next steps, and the upcoming techniques. It's better for the white balance to happen in our first layer. But if we want to control the background and somehow adjust its lighting, process it and create that depth. Exactly like the image you're seeing here right now. The first thing we need to do is to have a separation, which, well, Master Capture can do. It can do this job very cleanly for us. Within the Layer and Mask panel, you can utilize the Subject option. This subject feature automatically identifies and selects your main subject for you. I'm going to click on it now so that this process happens and it creates the mask for me. But one important thing to note about this step is, naturally, of course, the mask it creates needs some slight adjustment. All you have to do is navigate away from the preview section and switch over to either Always Display Mask or Display Grayscale Mask to see exactly what changes have been applied to your image. It's now abundantly clear and obvious that the separation it has done is relatively clean, but it still requires a bit more careful refinement and polishing, especially around the edges. So we definitely need to do this, but I really don't want to spend any more unnecessary time on this particular issue, right? I want to move forward directly and immediately to the actual task we want to do. The most important point to note here is that the selection that has been made is fundamentally based on the specific subject matter on our primary subject within the image. And we want to spend some time focusing on the background, so let me show you how this looks right here first. Therefore, we need to focus our mask. All you need to do is go to the created layer, right-click on it, and you'll see an option called Invert Mask. I click on it, and my mask gets inverted. Now, any command I give to the software will be applied based on this very mask that has been created for me, and the changes will happen to the background. Well, one of the things we can do is go to the exposure panel and adjust the exposure a bit, either decreasing or increasing it. Let me set this back to its original state. Look, I can manually increase or perhaps decrease the exposure, but my professional suggestion is that you should probably not do that. I've created a mask layer for myself to have here as a sample, and I want to create an exact duplicate copy of it for our use. But what I really want to do is to start gradually darkening the areas according to the specific perspective of my image and effectively separate the main subject from the background. Right now, what we're seeing is that the subject and the background are stuck together and we don't have any lighting depth. So you have both the subject in view, right? And you can see the background all the way to the end, right? If we want to have a much more beautiful and better image and make it kind of studio-like sort of. Now my graphics card is really starting to struggle quite a bit. Almost as if we're trying to shoot with professional high-intensity studio lights in a way. We definitely need to very carefully build our masks and create the shadows based on the perspective and the overall complex lighting structure and composition of our image. Pay close attention, here we have a one-point perspective. That means exactly from this part, everything converges to a single point and that point is outside our image. So, it's a one-point perspective. I am working right here at the moment, and now I can start building my masks based on this. I want to use this very mask that I just created. To do this, before I start working on the mask and making changes to it, I make a copy of it so I have a reference for myself. I right-click and select duplicate at the bottom to create another mask. It copies exactly the same layer for us, with everything that's inside it, including the mask that's inside. I turn off the lower layers. I keep this one so I can duplicate it again if needed. Now I go to the top layer. The mask is also clear. Look, exactly like this. But now, first of all, I want to darken the upper portion of the canvas a bit more, making sure it aligns with the specific angle shown in my image. Then, at the bottom section, we have the option to either add or remove various tools to customize our masks as needed. Well, this is one of the attractive features of Capture One software. In other software, this feature is much weaker. It's in Camera Raw and Lightroom, but is less effective there. Here, we can make really strong use of it. I'll go to the option called Linear Gradient and select it. For the upper part, I need to specify whether it should be added or subtracted. You can select any of these options. I want to subtract from it, meaning I want to use the subtract mode, which is already selected by default in the menu. I click on the Create Mask button and start drawing carefully so that a specific part of my mask gets removed from the view. Exactly like this, but pay close attention. I'm also carefully considering the overall perspective of my image and how it fits with that background. It's very important to me to understand what the specific angle and the direction of the light are in the scene. Exactly like this, making sure everything aligns perfectly. I'm going to create this layer mask and you might wonder what's happening here. Because our subject was already selected before, and now we're performing these actions on the background. Meaning, we're effectively removing parts from the selected background area. These are the visual changes that we are about to make right now. As you can see, our subject remains unaffected. Let's go to only display and slightly reduce the brightness. Notice how cleanly the top of the image darkens with a very smooth gradient. Naturally, its light intensity shouldn't be higher than these other areas. We should have less light power in our upper space. For a bit more appeal, alright, that's it for this part, but let's move on to the next section. The section that relates to the spaces on the right and left. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the right and left sides as well. Starting from this exact same layer, which we previously utilized as a specific sample for the mask, I am going to right-click on it, choose to duplicate it once again, and then proceed to use this new copy. I will go back to it, make sure to turn it on, and then carefully select another linear gradient tool, setting it specifically to function as a subtractor so that it successfully creates its own mask, and then we can continue. Let's turn this on as well so we can see everything clearly, and then we'll move on to this part. I reduce it. I will carefully adjust the width to make it slightly narrower and also modify the orientation by shifting its angle just a tiny bit. This is exactly the way it should look when you are finished. Again, I go to the brightness. Brightness can really help us here. I'm going to lower the brightness a bit, and this creates a tunnel-like feeling for my image, meaning the end of the image has less light and the focus of the light is at the beginning of the image. Look, if you consider the start of the image, as it moves toward the end and the eye follows its path, that part gradually becomes darker. Exactly like a tunnel, where the beginning is bright and the ends are dark. Alright, I made this part darker too, and I'm doing the same thing here. I do it with brightness. Again, I make another copy of this mask, meaning another duplicate. I turn on the layer and once more go to linear gradient in subtract mode, and now I tell it, this time, to come from this side. Actually, I made a mistake, sorry. We should drag it from this side. Just exactly like this right here. Let's shift and change the angle ever so slightly. Let's increase the spread of our gradient. Of course, all of this is a matter of personal taste, and let's reduce the brightness. What happened is that the area around the background or around my subject became darker, and our subject in the center of the image stands out better. And the important point is that this should be based on the perspective and the direction of light in our image. We've done this, and we definitely need to pay attention to this matter. Why? Because if we just arbitrarily place the subjects in the center and start working on the edges, if we darken the edges in a uniform, monotonous way, well, we won't have a natural looking image. We must definitely consider the direction of light and the perspective present in our image. Let's create the masks and generate these shadows. Let's look at the before and after together. This is the before and this is the after. The lower part can also be made a bit darker. Again, I'll use the same layer. First, I have created a copy of this layer. Then I am going to brighten it up, and once more I will apply the same command again. I'm using a linear gradient in subtract mode, and this time I'll apply it from the top to subtract. I'll also increase the range of my gradient a bit of control. You have to do this, but the direction is the most important thing. Make sure to mention it. I'm considering exactly this direction for it based on the line of these tiles. And for the mosaics down here, I'm doing the same thing based on that. And once again, I am going to carefully set the overall brightness level just a little bit lower than before. Exactly like this, and that's how it turned out. Before and after our image. Now, in this photo, the one I worked on before, inside this one, this photo has different layers. I've also done some other work on it, which I'll try to talk about in the next video. One is this photo, and the other is this one, which has had a lot of work done on it. Take a look. Let me show you the before and after using exactly this technique. The same technique was used, but in a different way, which I'll definitely talk about more in future videos. I'll talk to you about these photo editing techniques and the Capture One software in more detail.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and share it with your friends so they can benefit from it too. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments section. I read all the comments and I'll respond to them. I also have a suggestion. There's a video right here that you can check out as well.